Hi, welcome to the next episode of the Page One podcast. I'm Tarek.
I'm Marco.
And you've just heard an advert for Page One, the writer's notebook. It's on Kickstarter. It's doing really well. We're over halfway there so far.
Yeah, over 50% already. So grab yours now while you can.
What about the notebook?
Oh dear. Anyway, this week on the podcast, we've got Ed James, the author of several police procedural books, the DS Scott Cullen series, DI Fenchurch series, and various others. He's a very prolific writer, started out in self-publishing, moved into publishing, but we had a really fascinating chat with him really about exactly how he moved from self-publishing into publishing and how he writes 4 books a year. Which
4 books a year is not easy to do.
No, it's incredible, but he has quite a meticulous way of doing it, as you'll hear. So anyway, we'll let you hear what Ed had to say about it. We actually started the interview by showing Ed a Page One notebook, and he had some helpful comments about it. So we'll start off with that, and we'll be back at the end of the podcast for some more chat.
See you later.
This looks really amazing. It's like what is it they printed on?
It's what they call soft touch, fake leather. It's faux leather. Yeah.
It's like there's like a moleskin clone, sort of not clone, but it was like a sort of similar. It's a high end one. That's what it reminds me of. It's a really nice thing. But so yeah, I mean, it's a good idea, and I know a lot of writers who have like a moleskin. This is usually the default one, the hardcover ones, and that's what they do, and it's usually one for each book. And I use the moleskin Kais, so the sort of jotter size. So you get kind of almost A3 when you put it out to do a lot of drawing and stuff.
Oh, right, okay.
But it looks like it's really sort of nice. The the sort of the breakdown. It's got everything you want in there, like characters. Plot, setting, and then your scene breakdown. It's a pretty nice thing because a lot of people like to have. I write a lot of books and every 4 a year, but most people do one, and some maybe 1 or 1.5, and you have like a notebook.
Yeah.
And having something like this where it's all just easily marked out, and you're able to just sort of fire into it and stuff is a good thing. The only thing I would suggest, a lot of people have when you're writing. So I'm very much sort of breaking it down like this sort of film structure sort of thing. So log like. I mean, I don't know that disciplined. That's what I'm trying to do. It's not easy. But the likes of it's like Mark Edwards is a great example. Someone who's the complete opposite of me. I'm good friends with him and talk about it a lot. But he's a complete pantser, just makes it up as he goes along, and then he'll usually get about 30%, 33% in and realise it's a disaster. He's done too much and he has to go and strim a load out and then go, right, I know what it's about now. And whereas it's like I'm sort of breaking it down and, look at, breaking it into acts and little beats and stuff like that. And I've got like an idea of where it ends and who the bad guy is and what they're up to. The big sort of development is about the motivation and stuff like that. So character motivation is one of the sort of key things in there, I think, because that's where, whatever you're writing, it's all about, whether it's like a drama or a romance or crime or action or whatever, there's always all interesting, good stuff comes from the conflict between characters and stuff, establishing that. I do a lot of sort of mind maps and sort of breaking stuff down, and like that you've got your scene chunks there. So I'll have like sort of the sequence of scenes and stuff. I don't know if you have come across Alex Sokoloff. So she's an American writer. She's married to Craig Robertson, who's a Scottish crime writer. But she worked as a screenwriter for years and wrote a book called Stealing Hollywood, which is excellent for all the, there's a lot of people talk about Save the Cat and so on, but it's just good, but it's not great, whereas Alex goes into a lot more detail, has all the breakdowns of plots of loads of films, like I think Raiders of the Lost Ark and all this sort of stuff,
okay,
lots of different genres. And I can't remember what plot was. Yeah, it was about the getting down to this sort of sequences of scenes and breakdowns. So like the sort of traditional Hollywood thing is they talk about 3 acts, and it's actually 4, because the second one's split in half. So then each one of those you break down into another 2. So you've got basically 8 sequences of scenes which roll up to 4 acts, and that's your story. And so each of those sequences I like to sort of doodle out and sort of have a little mind map. Here's the things I need to be thinking about in terms of the overall story. Here's the things that where I need to get to over there and where I need to get back to. And always, then just sort of drawing the diagram, there's a sort of flow through there. Usually, because the stuff I've written to date is all sort of single character police procedural stuff. So it's a mystery and a detective solving that mystery. So it's quite easy to do the narrative stuff. I've written, the last thing I wrote, last year was like 3 point of view thing it's like more of a thriller, and it's very different. So you got to keep lots of things in mind and sort of flowing. So one of the things I always think about at scene level actually is what might worth thinking about for the sort of the book is and my agent he also does a lot of editing for me as well. He's always like hammering on at me about it comes from like screenwriting, but the philosophy of a scene should have some function. So it's either going to show character or it moves the plot along. And so when you have like an expositional scene, it's like you have to do a hell of a lot to make it sort of tense and dramatic and so on. So it's like I don't know, when in the rush of trying to get a sort of something maybe too realistic or something, I sort of forget that. So having that, the 3 things I try to do, as well as like when I get into a detailed outline, it's like, okay, so my scene, where it is, when it is, who's in it, and so on. But the 3 key things are: what's the point of view character's objective in the scene? What's the obstacle to getting that objective? And what's the actual outcome when you finish the scene? And once you've got those things, you can then build a quite a nice scene. Is it Into the Woods by John York? Is that his name? John York, I think. It's another sort of writing craft book, and the way he talks about scenes is always having like a twist. So his example is from an EastEnders script, where there's these 2 women having an argument, and one of them wants to go away or something to America. I can't remember the detail, and the twist is that the other woman is her mother, and she doesn't know. So it comes out, and then you got the doof 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 bit. So that's so that's another thing to sort of think about. If there's a twist in there that you can spin out, but in terms of like how I would use that document, the book, I tend to do a lot of stuff on computer and stuff, and using Scrivener and Scalpel and various things. But I do still use bits of paper, and I'd use it sort of for just a high level dump of information I need to get out. Yep. And then, like mind map for a scene, here's the objective, what do I do? What's the way to twist the knife? Yeah. Deeper and deeper. But then it becomes quite prescriptive if you put that in your book, in the booklet and stuff like that. So.
I mean, it sounds like if you're saying you do 4 books a year, it sounds like you must do a lot of plotting for it. That's a lot of time spent planning.
The only way, unless you were, I don't know, on coke or something, the only way you could do that, and I'm not. The only way you could do that is to take some ridiculous performance enhancing. But it's all about outlining, so you know where you're going. So everyone I know, writers, they're either people who can write a lot or people who struggle to get there, and they're always like, oh, I've got to do 1,500 words a day, and every day it's a battle to work out where that plot's going. So if you're sitting down to work out where the plot's going that day, what your characters are doing, who's where, who's there, it's a lot of thinking you have to do in that day. And you might have other things going on in your life and so on. So I like to do it all way up front and get like the point Mark Edwards gets to where it's all falling apart. I like to get that really early. So I usually have an idea, this is what the story is.
Yeah.
And I'll go, this doesn't work because of this doesn't work for that. And it just sort of, it's like, oh my God, I'm going to have to give up on this. It's usually every book is that point where I have to give up on this. And then I'll have a point of inspiration where I go, but it's this, or like, this is what needs to happen. If I flip that, right, well, okay, and then it starts working. You get that sort of. I usually feel like I get to the point where it's too narrow, and it's not, and that's like my spidey sense starts tingling. It's like it's just there's something not right here, and it's I've written 20 odd books or something, so like I've got a lot of experience of writing, and so like there's a lot of skill. I don't want to blow my own trumpet, but it's like when you have experience, totally. You learn lots of things, and you sort of you get like the sort of learned experience is like I remember we did this thing when you used to work for a living rather than playing with people's tormented lives in detective books, and it was it talked about this training course, and it was about edge, they called it. So like if you're a surgeon, if you've been doing that for 20 years and you're looking at like a body and try someone's body in triage, and you're going through it, they just know what they're doing. And if something goes wrong, most operations are like, ticking along, it's fine, you do this, you do that, blah, blah, blah. It's when things don't go wrong and they go, right, well, this is how I do it, because they've dealt with it so many operations, seen so many cases. But that's that sort of edge is like, because you build up experience, and everyone does it in whatever walk of life they're doing it. And as writers, you develop your skills the more you do. And like sort of my first book, it took me like 3 years on and off to get. It was actually the third thing I wrote, but it's the first thing that's published. It took me 3 years on and off to get to a point where I was happy with it. And even then, because it was self-published and I have complete control over it, I've edited about 5 or 6 times before. Since then, and I'm still. I know it's terrible compared, like based on a lot of sort of my thing, but like to the most readers, it's like they love it. It's like. Because
you're so close to it, you see the flaws.
Yeah, and also
is that a good thing, being able to go back into it all the time and play with it? No, it's not.
It's I did it again with the 5th Cullen books, and last year, and that was really terrible, and it needed a lot of work, and it's like every time I've done it. So I've done it for the first 5 Cullens, and I got the rights back for the first book I had with Thomas and Mercer. Called Snared, and I rewrote that, and it was literally a page 1 rewrite. The only thing, when you're looking at these old things, what's usually good about old books is the idea, not the execution. Those like 80, 90, 100,000 words are so illusory because they're probably not very good. And so I've talked to my agent a lot about this, because there's a book I wrote, it was 2013, and it was about vampires in the Scottish Highlands, and it was like there's something I really liked about it, but nobody did because it didn't sell at all. And some people could go, "Are you going to do any more of them?" It's like, absolutely not, because nobody reads them. And but it's like the sort of the what your brain will tell you is, you've got like there's about 80,000 words, right? So you just need to go through that, tweak it, and you'll be done. And it's like, it's not, because every time I've done it, it's ended up taking about 5 or 6 times longer, and it would have been quicker to write again from scratch and been a lot stronger to just take the idea that's there and put it through the sort of the sausage machine as I developed it now, 20 odd books down the line, than 3 or 4 books down the line where it's like I was finding my feet and no idea what I was doing in a lot of cases. It hadn't, because I come from a sort of self-publishing background, you don't automatically get any editing. Like, so if you sell a book to a publisher, you go through 3 or 4 rounds of editing, and that's after an agent has torn it apart to submit and so on. And when you're self-publishing, you're just you have no idea about unless you've worked in the industry or whatever, you don't really know what you're supposed to do, and you just pick stuff up. And now, I've done it so many times, both published and self-published, and I've got a slick process for the self-publishing stuff now where I've got some trusted editors and stuff. But the earlier stuff, there's no editing, and it was like my dad checking for typos and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So why the mix of the publishing, the stuff with the agent and stuff with yourself? Why does that come from?
If part of it is like my agent sort of suggested it, to be honest. I started out. It's a guy called Alan Guthrie, who is a sort of an author in his own right back in the day, and now sort of agents and edits, and he's getting back into writing. So we're co-writing a novel, or we have been for the last 5 years, and we're finally going to get it finished. How
does that work? How's that process?
So it was a book he wrote, would be about 10 years ago now. So he's doing a creative writing MA. And one of the things with that is you do a novel and stuff, and he wrote it as he would one of his. So he wrote a lot of sort of noir books, so they're like 50s stuff like James M. Cain and all those guys, but set in modern contemporary Edinburgh, like in Portobello and around here and stuff. And they weren't particularly commercial, but you got a lot of sort of. They're really incredibly well written books. So you got a lot of praise from like people like Val McDermid and Ian Rankin, and. So he wrote this book as part of that MA, and kind of never really nailed it, because it was the idea he's got is fairly sort of serial killery, and his background's all about sort of really nasty characters doing nasty things and getting worse, and doing a sort of police procedural kind of thing, which is what a serial killer novel would generally be. Those bits didn't work, so. A lot of it has been me taking his idea, writing something new, both of us realising it wasn't very good, and trying another go. And we went through about 3 or 4 passes trying to get it right, and I think it was about 2 years ago, I sort of sat down and took about, 7 or 8 of the drafts we'd both created over the years and collated it into something else and added a little bit another 30 or 40,000 words, and it wasn't the writing level stuff wasn't very good, but it's quite a complex idea, or certainly a complex idea to get right, if that makes sense. So it's got a lot of moving parts, and there's a lot of complex character stuff, and I think we've got it to the point where certainly the building blocks are all right. The problems with it are now the writing, and so Al's going through that and sort of finessing it. So it's a lot of people, like so Mark Edwards I mentioned before, he wrote a few books with another writer called Louise Voss, huge sellers, and the way they wrote about it was that they had 2 characters, and they wrote their own
a character.
and they alternated between them.
Okay.
And other people, so like one person will be like an expert at outlining, and another person will be an expert at nice writing and all that sort of stuff. So there's a sort of clear dividing line between the sort of the roles and responsibilities. Whereas, so actually, it reminds me of another book. I keep going on about books I've read about, but it's Write, Publish, Repeat by, I can't remember who the guys were, but they do a load of podcasts. It's not a self-publishing formula, because that's Mark Dawson, but something like that.
Yeah.
But there's about 3 or 4 of them who have this company where they write collaboratively, so they'll pair off, and you can imagine having different combinations. So someone will do like they call it their beats. So there's like, here's like, I don't know, 30 or 40 beats, this happens, blah, 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 and it's all tight. And then someone will turn that into a book, and then for the next book, they might do the beats and someone else writes it. Right. So, and they have a sort of really solid business model of, first book free, second one less, and it works really, really well for them. None of them have got like publishing backgrounds as far as I remember, but I think some of them had like sort of digital marketing stuff, which has really sort of held a lot of, it was helped their sort of approach to that, and it's really worked for them. So, so there's a lot of different ways to sort of co-write.
I mean, I'm just thinking about what Alan's doing. Sometimes, I suppose, some writers would be, if they've written a story, even if it doesn't work that well, they'd be reluctant to let someone else play with that story.
Yeah, it is a collaborative approach because you still have to work with an editor, unless you just don't. So you work with 2 or 3 editors who'll help you develop the idea into something that's publishable, and you work with agents and and so on. And when you're collaborating, you have to work with someone who you implicitly trust and get on extremely well with, and where your relationship is sufficiently strong that if it was to go really badly, that it would survive, or that you can talk through the difficulties and stuff. And the reason it's taken so long is there's a lot of sort of time constraints on Al's side from other sort of work he's had to do, and that's been something that's been quite frustrating for me because I've put in like about 2 or 3 books worth of time into it, but it's something I still believe in. And it's actually, if you look back over the projects I've done, it's one of the ones I've learned the most from, because when you're writing with someone, especially an author, so before I met him and he became my agent, he was one of my favourite authors, and it's like, the way he writes is exactly everything I wanted to do, and I didn't have the skills or technique to be able to do that. So actually seeing how someone else approaches a book is incredibly powerful, because you're getting inside their head and you can actually see other ways of doing it. You just, all your life experiences will lead you down one way, and then you actually see someone else's completely different stuff, and it's like, all right, okay, so there's all these, he's really strong on character motivations and stuff, which obviously should be very strong in a police procedural, but a lot of it's mystery and stuff, so you don't really, if you don't show the villain doing their crimes and getting away with it and all that sort of stuff, you don't really cover that sort of stuff until towards the end, when you have the scene in the library where there's Major Broomstick with a pipe or whatever. But it's all about, why are some people doing this, making sure it's very, very logically sort of approached, so as far as you can achieve that it all makes sense, and whoever's in the situation is behaving as they see fit in sort of most logical way.
The other thing I was going to ask, actually, what you covered there, was when you saying that going back over something old, and it would be quicker to actually start rewriting it from scratch. But certainly when I've done that, and I have done that with a couple of things, it's difficult to let go of what's already there, even if even if it's not in front of you. The idea's kind of lodged in your head, and while you're basing it on the ideas, sometimes it can take a long time to actually veer away from what you've already done.
Absolutely.
And also, like, because I'm looking at old stuff, it's stuff that's been published and is like number X in a series of Y books, so there's like loads of stuff written on top of that, so I can't necessarily go back and change it so much. But the easy thing is actually to do that, but it's so hard to do it. It is actually a lot more efficient and effective to just get a page 1 rewrite, start again. What's the usually when things fall apart at that early stage of outlining, what I'm usually getting to is what's the actual nub of the story. And a lot of stuff I've been trying to do this year is develop my sort of idea generation. So I'm always in awe of authors who have like just ridiculously excellent high level stuff. So like Linwood Barclay or Blake Crouch, very different writers, but they've got incredible, you just look at the pitch, like Steve Kavanagh's 13 book, the pitch is so strong. Like that's what sells these books. It doesn't matter how good you are as a writer, and these are all really good writers as well. But the difference between like someone who's as good a writer but with sort of average ideas it's very obvious, and that's what editors at publishing houses are after. It's like really simple, unique, strong ideas that you can just go, the elevator pitch stuff.
Yeah, it's simple is the word, isn't it? Because the best stories are ones that you go, oh, that's a great idea. Why has that not been done before? Because it seems so obvious, but obviously it wasn't. But
it's like there's some sort of hook, and usually sort of dabbling around, and like the stuff I've written, I'm pleased with a lot of it, but I wouldn't say, it's like the sort of thing Hollywood are going to be eager to convert into films, because film is like the concept is king there. So it's like none of my stuff. Yeah, they're not going to be after. They're not going to be after any of it, and I'm aware of that. I think TV maybe is a bit different, but developing that concept is the hardest. Yeah. It's the hardest thing to do, and you can tell like these guys. They, if you looked at the other day, I was looking through all of Leonard Barclay's novels on Amazon, just the blurbs, and it's like, and they're so strong and so unique, and there's a lot of things he will explore, like there's a lot of missing people mysteries and all that sort of stuff, and there's some terror stuff, and there's but it's like they're very strong and but also very simple and pure, and like going back to that, it's like getting to that. I wish I knew how he did it, or could borrow his brain for like a couple of days. But it might be that it takes these guys, a year to develop the idea, and it's a very painful and slow and difficult process. You're chipping away. So you've got this storyline, and then you just go, but I have to take this out, and then 6 months later, take that out, and right, and then all of a sudden you get that moment of clarity. It's like, this is it, and now I know what I need to write.
Yeah. I think that is true, because I've often found that I've only written one book, which is a kind of crime book. But I think even as I was writing it, I think I always thought it's this type of book, and then the more drafts I did of it, I kind of realised, actually, this is what the story's about. And it took about 8-9 drafts for me to realise what the actual story was and what the thrust of the book was. And it was actually ended up being a very different book than what I had been when I first started, or what I thought it would be. I think you're right. I think you don't know at first when you first start, and that taught me I need to plan more and not just start writing with the first idea that pops into my mind.
Well, I mean, the way I think about it is because like that first book I did took me 3 years, and that was the first sort of positive sign I got from the world of publishing, was that when I don't know what it's like now, but back in the day, all you would do is you get the Writers and Artists yearbook, go through it, send it off to the agents, and then it's like 3 chapters and a synopsis and a cover letter, blah blah blah, and you're just waiting for the standard form rejection slips to come through,
or not even.
And then, but actually, I got like what I can't even remember which agent it was. Came back and said, "Can we have the full thing?" And it's like, oh my god! And I'd actually finished it, and my girlfriend never lets me forget this, but we spent her birthday weekend one year going through. She was editing it and I was correcting it. She was editing it on one computer and I was editing on another. I was checking her changes and it was like, but then it went off, and they came back 3 months later saying, it's not a big enough story or whatever, and I got really angry, and I'm going to show them, and I sort of sat down and go, this is how I'll do it, I'll change it, and then I didn't do any of it. I got really busy in my day job and blah blah blah, and then a friend said, what happened to that book? Because he'd read it and liked it, and I was like, oh yeah. So I sat down, and that was actually, I figured out the bad guy's motivation when I was walking the dogs on the beach one day, and it was like, right, okay, so that's how it works. And then I got all these changes, but I ended up like, I had a 90,000 word novel, and I think I kept about 30,000, so I had to write another 60,000 of new stuff, because there was just lots of, because I'd been making it up as I go along, and there was a lot of police procedure, and I had no idea what I was doing, and none of it made sense when I read it back, and I could see why I got rejected. And then it's like, okay, but you turned it into something I think's, now it's like borderline okay, but then I was like really pleased with it.
Was that the first Scott Cullen book?
Yeah, Ghost in the Machine. Yeah. And it's like I used to be in bands and stuff, and one of the guys used to play guitar. I would play bass, he played guitar, and he used to sort of say about when they were starting out in his previous band, you come up with all his guitar parts that you could just about play, not quite, and you're having to do it on stage, and it's like, but you're pushing your technique and your skill, and that's what I've done. Tried to do all the time, is just push myself to something I can't quite do to sort of, because for one thing, it's the only thing that makes you interesting, but also if you want to turn it into to do this as a career, you have to keep getting better at it and keep it fresh for yourself and trying to do new things and get new experiences out of it. So
I mean, with the Scott Cullen books, you started off self-publishing.
Yeah.
And then, first of all, how did that work out for you? Did it do well immediately, or did it take a bit of time?
No, it was a complete disaster immediately. And it got to the point where I remember being on holiday and like, it was not the sort of thing you should do on holiday, but checking my KDP sales, and it's like, is this working? Because I haven't sold any. So I went and bought it myself, and then it came through a couple of hours later. It's like, so it is working. I just haven't been selling any books. And those days it was like a lot of. So it was kind of like there was a sort of golden age of KDP sort of stuff, about 2011, where like sort of John Locke and Amanda Hawking and those people, and they just chucked stuff up for 99p and sold millions in America or whatever. And I think like Mark Edwards and Louise Voss did their first book then, and there was loads of stuff because it was like Wild West country on Amazon.
Yeah, totally.
I remember the story Mark tells is about how they changed the title of their book, I don't know what it's called, but afterwards, for fans of Stephen King and Stieg Larsson, kaboom, up to number 3 in the charts.
But you see that, don't you? A lot of Amazon titles have, for fans of so-and-so, a twist you won't see coming or something.
Yeah,
all that must be a big thing.
So that was a big thing. So the reason why they did it was because the Amazon algorithm read that in and presented those books genuinely to people who'd bought Stephen King or Stieg Larsson books.
Right, okay.
So that's why they got so high at the charts. It's not that people just stumble upon it. It's the complete opposite. It's like Amazon throwing attention at people, and all the stuff now, like a twist you won't see coming, a psychological thriller of the year, Sunday Times bestseller and stuff. The reason a lot of digital publishers were using that stuff was the algorithm again was picking that up.
Right.
So a lot of the Amazon stuff is people trying to hack the algorithm.
Yeah.
So someone will find something. You see this field that says publisher, right? Put Stephen King or put whatever. I don't know. That's the sort of stuff people have done, and the algorithm goes, oh right, Stephen King, and I'll say you've bought a book by Stephen King. You might want to look at this, and that's what generates sales. So people are they're doing a lot of sort of, it's kind of gaming the system in a way, but it's like it's a marketing tool, and also if the books were rubbish, that would be kind of productive because you get people spending £2 on a dreadful book that's about God knows vampires in the Highlands, and they want a Stephen King book set in Maine about something else, or whatever, and they go, oh my God, this is terrible. So your reviews would the scores would plummet. So there is a certain element where it's actually you're gaming the system, but you have to have a good product behind it. And that was a digression, but it was really slow at start, and it did a lot of stuff on Twitter mainly, which is quite hard to do now because it's a cesspit. But this was 2012, and it was a bit nicer then, and there was like some naughty things you could do, called an app called Tweet Adder, where you got to say Ian Rankin, and it grabbed all his followers, and you had a big pile, and then it would start following them. And if the person didn't follow you back within 3 days, it would unfollow them. And if they did follow you back, they'd send them a direct message saying, "Hi, nice to meet you. You might like my book." Blah blah blah. And it was amazing how well it worked. But they banned that about a year later. But that was one of the things, because it sort of got people doing that. It did work, and that's a lot of the Facebook advertising and Amazon advertising now. It's kind of along those lines where you're basically just targeting someone. Yeah. Like if you look at this stuff Mark Dawson does on his Facebook ads courses and stuff, his books are very similar to Lee Child. So what he will do when he's setting up an advert campaign is target people who like Lee Child on Facebook, and he'll send them adverts for this book that's very much, this is about Lee Child. And that's what publishers will do as well. If you're at Orion or Penguin or whatever, they'll be buying your book because it reminds them a bit of Ian Rankin or Lee Child or whatever, but slightly different. There's a different spin on it, so they can go to Waterstones or Tesco or whoever and say, this book is like Ian Rankin or Lee Child, but it's slightly different. And and you know, it's all how all the marketing stuff works. But that was the sort of trick, and that kind of got a chunk of sales. And then I think the second book in the series came out in October, and the third one, it was January the next year. So that was like
quite quick.
Yeah, so that's one of the things about the indie side of it, is you have to be quick. You'll see, you know, whenever so there's a point where I had a year gap, and I think I might have had that twice, and my sales went right down. Yeah. And that was because I was stockpiling books with Amazon Publishing at Thomas & Mercer, so they'd released a few quite close together, but it was taking me, you know, say 9 months to write them. And then they were releasing them over like 2 months or 3 months or something. So you kind of you do need a regular publishing cadence or something, just to sort of keep you in the algorithm and ticking over, so that it keeps presenting your books to new readers and stuff. And that's one of the definite big things you need to do. And but also, like, you're building up. The objective I wanted was to build up a decent enough backlist, just for like, well, this is quite a good thing to do. But a lot of, you know, I remember reading a Lee Child thing, and I think it might have been in that book, Reacher Said Nothing, which is I highly recommend reading. But it basically says you write a new book to sell the backlist, because, you know, he's got, I think it's the 24th one's out soon. But, you know, he writes a lot of you know, books, because obviously he's still getting a massive income from the backlist, and I don't think he needs to work or write like J.K. Rowling and stuff, but they do it just. But that's definitely true for people like us guys down in the trenches, that you do need to keep that sort of regular, frequent release thing, especially in the indie world. You do need to, you know, release often. And also, I think you don't need the 120, 160 word doorstop sort of, you look at your value and the spine width sort of thing, you know, that you can get. People don't tend to notice when they're reading on a Kindle or an iPad or whatever, that it's 60,000 words or whatever, as opposed to 120. And actually, I'm a big fan of much shorter books. Like, if you look back at the sort of the golden age of paperbacks in America in like the 50s and stuff, those books were 35,000 words. Like the early Ed McBain ones, for example, the 87th Precinct, they were about 35,000 words, and they sold like millions and millions and millions of copies of those books, and they're really good, really tight, really focused. And then they started losing readers and trying to increase their income by saying, can you know, write longer books, so that we can show that you're getting more value. We can charge you $10 for a book because it's got that much extra spine width. But yeah, you know, so getting just new product out there is a really good thing to do. I
mean, you have to be incredibly disciplined to do what you do. Four books a year.
So I was doing that for 18 months before I was able to go full time. And you know, so I was working in London and sitting in hotel rooms, you know, because I used to live up here, and I was flying down there and training back, and any opportunity was writing, you know, so taking my laptop in before, sitting in a cafe before work, going out at lunchtime, sitting writing, and after work getting something to eat, checking emails, and then going to a hotel room and writing. And
it's a lot of effort then.
It's, you know, you're kind of chasing a dream, and you don't want to put all that effort in. You know, you get a, I suppose the universe tells you if your efforts are not quite appreciated and that nobody's interested or whatever, then, you know, it's like it's okay to not be good at something. Like, I'm rubbish at football, no matter how good I want to be at it. But, you know, like, it's fine. But, you know, like, it's, you know, people, you know, if you want to try to be a writer, then you need to see the reality of it, and it is not. You know, people see, oh yeah, it's a dream, and all this sort of stuff. And maybe if you're Lee Child or J.K. Rowling or whatever, you know, you never have to work again, sort of thing. But it is still a job. You know, you still have to produce stuff, and I find that, you know, I have to produce still more books, and it's like, you know, it gets, you know, and also you get certain things get harder. Like, you get more skilled, but your motivation levels go down because. I've had books that have sold not what I expected, so you get very angry about them because it's the wasted as effort, like, you know, the opportunity cost. I could have sat and written another Cullen instead of doing that, or I could have done this instead of doing that. And so it focuses me to get better at planning ahead and not just going, right, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. So the stuff that I'm doing now is I'm setting a certain sales threshold for the next book in a series, rather than just going ahead and writing it and waiting for people to have bought enough to make it worth my while. Because you usually get an idea that it will sell this far into a series. I know it will sell pretty much the same as the last one over a certain amount of time, but I don't want to start the clock ticking until it's reached a certain level, because I could be, if it never gets there, then I know, right, well, I don't have to write any more in that series because nobody wants me to, or not enough people want me to.
So what is the difference? You said you've got your self-publishing stuff now pretty streamlined. What is it that you do now that you didn't do before?
Well, so having editors and good editors that you can trust. So because I'm writing quickly, you want people who also edit quickly and well. So you know that when you get a manuscript, it's going to take them 2 weeks or whatever to return it, and a lot of it is so trying to be very efficient with the process. So like the sixth Fenchurch book I did, which came out end of last month, the way I did that was I wrote the outline, and instead of sitting down and writing really, not that I ever do it, but beautiful prose or whatever, I just wrote a dialogue draft, what I call it. So it would be like an example, just like a train of dialogue, then an action which would show an emotion. So it would be like Fenchurch is angry because he's always angry, and then more dialogue, and then someone else's dialogue and their emotion, and just just like brief note they're in a cafe outside, and so on. So then went through and edited that, and then got my agent to edit that, and then I went through and fleshed it out. And the reason I did that was because earlier, like you're saying about that 30,000 words of 90,000, and then writing new stuff, all that sheen and polish you put on those scenes and chapters and stuff is kind of wasted. It's wasted, it's like, because it's the Stephen King thing of kill your darlings. It's like when you kill your darlings, it's like this. If it, he talks a lot about on writing about the first draft is about finding the book, and the second draft is taking everything else out, or whatever his quote was. But it's about being efficient, because a lot of time you'll find going through, it doesn't make sense. Why have I done that in that order? I need to move this, or that seems rubbish. So I've actually only spent an hour or an hour and a half doing that that scene that it's just dialogue, and actually I can go back and just trim out, or there's some bits that I want to move into another scene. And because they're in a cafe, they're sort of notionally in a cafe, they know that when I write it, they'll be in a cafe. And actually this chunk actually takes place in an police interview room, where the actions and atmosphere would be very different. Then you've not wasted that time. So it was quite a clean and efficient process. The only problem with that one was it was a novella and ended up being a novel. So that was the difficulty with that. But it's something I've done before. The only thing is you've got to be aware that when you do that dialogue draft thing, you do end up with a book that's very dialogue-y. So if you want a lot of internal sensations and things like that, you've got to be very careful that you're not just using all your notional words up with churning
That's
dialogue.
quite an interesting way of doing it, and I have to say, I can imagine it working well in the Fenchurch one, because a lot of it, I thought the thing that I enjoyed the most was the dialogue. I thought that you did a really good job of giving every character their own style of speech and stuff, and the way, and the kind of back and forth banter I thought was excellent, and I kind of laughed out loud a few times at some of the stuff they were saying, and it felt very real, so I can imagine that working well for that series of books.
So the thriller I wrote, it definitely wouldn't work for that, because it's got 3 points of view, for example, as well. So you have to really capture the voices, and I can't remember how I differentiated the 3 voices, but I think one of them's first person, and there's a bit of a mystery about their identity, and another person's a detective or an FBI agent, and another one's a politician, and it's like making sure each of those characters have the voices, like their internal voice is different. So that wouldn't suit that, and there's a lot of chases and action and tension and fighting and all that sort of stuff. But like definitely a police procedural, it works really well to, where it is back and forth, it is banter, and you're focusing on not all the sort of flannel. You're just like getting the story out. What's the objective? What's the outcome? What do they want here? And being quite pure about it, and hopefully rattling through that. And it's like going back to my days of IT project management stuff. It's like it's all about testing and making sure that you're going through things many times rather than just sitting down once and writing it to the end. It's actually no, I'll do a blip, 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 blip. So go through about 10 or 12 times.
I was going to say, I was going to ask if it was linked to what you did before, because it's a very methodical way of doing it that many people wouldn't probably approach it that way.
Yeah, if you look at, it's not that different. So, like in an IT environment, you have like a set of business requirements. So this is what the end user wants of something, whether it's like a banking system or it's Google or it's just your wee mate's spreadsheet that you're building for them. And then the technical solution would be to design that, and you've got like a blueprint there. And then someone goes away and builds that. And because you've got an understood set of requirements, you've got tests that you can apply to that. So does this what's been designed and built match what is at the start? And then you implement it and publish it. Put it into production. Yeah. And with books, it's like it's that you have got that design phase of the way I approach it anyway. Yeah. So you're designing your sort of story. This is what the theme I want to approach, and here's the character I want to write about, and so what's the sort of the mystery? What's the question? What's the sort of concept? And then you've got this big chunk of build time, where you're just crashing through the words. And at that, the only way I can do it is to map everything out and then hammer through that. I know people who'll take months and months and months to do that, and there's a lot of thinking time involved in that space. But I just get that down to like as short a time as possible, 2 or 3 weeks to get through that, but then look over that a couple of times. So I'm doing my own tests against it, and that's like with the testing of an IT system versus testing and you doing a publishing thing, it's editing. So you're looking at, I've developed all these things because I've worked with a lot of different editors. I know a lot of what people are looking for, and actually one of the best ways is to sort of design. Part of the design of my book process is to put those things in. So like I was talking earlier about the objective, obstacle and outcome stuff. That's because I know that if I just do a next scene as exposition, or just someone sitting in a car thinking, an editor's going to go, this is rubbish, cut it, because nothing happens or it doesn't show anything. And it's like, okay, right. So, I'll have someone putting a bomb under the car in the previous scene. So it's got some tension to it. Or whatever. But there's that, when you design it to pass editing in mind, it makes it much quicker to not only write, but to edit it as well. Because, doing 4 books a year is not just 4 book, writing, taking 12, 13 weeks to write a book. It's, you've got editing, and your time as an author in the editing process can be short, and it can be quite long. So I know an author who took 15 months to edit their first book because the publisher believed in it that much, and they liked certain elements of it and so on. But you can also do it in like 2 weeks or whatever. It depends on your sort of skill level and what the outcome is and so on.
Well, then how do you know when you're finished then? How do you know whether it's a 2 week or a 4 week, or how do you know when this book's ready to go? Or is it a case of waiting to see what your agent says?
It's basically just you assume. So it's when we're talking IT, you have all these stage gates. So Prince 2, which is the British government's project management framework, which everyone's supposed to use, but nobody actually does because it's just ridiculous. But they have these stage gates. So when you do design, you have a bit at the end where everyone has a meeting and goes, yes, I'm happy to progress it into build and do that. So it's kind of like the sort of thing you'd have in the book. With a book is that you have, I generally now pitch the ideas to my agent. He goes, no, this doesn't work. How about that? And I go, yeah, maybe, but no, I'll do this. And so like getting that idea generation stuff, so by the time I've even started outlining it, I know it's something that's going to be with commercial potential. And it's like, you talk about people like Leonard Barclay and Blake Crouch and stuff, all the those concepts those guys are coming up with, that's the time they'll spend developing to the point where they'll talk it probably through with editors or agents and they'll go, yeah, this is great. So they know that the time spent writing it is not at all wasted, because it's like the concept's been absolutely nailed. And that's where I'm kind of trying to get to now, is that level of stuff. Because I've done books where the concept was just not well baked at all, and I should have spent a lot more time developing that, and that's my fault, but something I've learned and trying to develop on. But you'll get, I always assume that it's going to be published until someone tells me otherwise, and it's that point where they tell you otherwise that can be a bit of a kicker. But it's important to be open with that and have done as little work as possible before that. So you've not wasted your time. I think Richard Ashcroft from The Verve said about his songs, it's like he's always got lots of ideas, and it's like the trick is both having lots of ideas and then being able to tell which ones are good. Whether you can agree with his solo career's quality or not, doesn't matter. But that, I think that's a sort of really good sort of good idea or good process to have, is to generate lots of ideas and be able to sort of attack them. And sometimes you find if you've got I went through about 20 or 30 ideas in January, and sometimes it was like, this is rubbish. But if I connect them and this happens, I get something that's quite interesting. And not that I've done anything with them, but just the practice of taking an idea and trying to form something nice is quite good. But usually what happens with these concepts is it'll be nothing to do with hard work. It'll be a shower thought or something. Right. But it's probably another saying, but it's the sort of the golf. I can't remember which golfer it was, but he said it's like luck comes that I'm a lucky golfer, but I also tend to practice a lot or something. I don't know what the exact quote is, but the more the harder practice, the luckier I get. That's it. Yeah. But that's the more you practice about ideas, the sort of better you get at developing ideas, or being able to recognise this idle thought is actually, if I spin it around this way, then I get this and I get that. And Charlie Brooker's really good at that for the Black Mirror stuff. It's like, I mean, they're not all perfect, but like some of the USS Callister episode and San Junipero are just those two were great. Such amazing concepts. And a lot of that stuff is he focuses on character and wants, even though it's like a sort of weird sci-fi twisted world sort of thing, that you get this clear character motivation thread running through it, and that's why it's captivating TV to watch and why people love it so much. I think it's not just about the concept, it's about the execution, making it very personal.
Is it only books you would want to write, or would you want to go and write a screenplay or something like that?
I've thought about this, and a lot of the way I approach books is like you would approach a screenplay, but the thing with film is it's incredibly difficult to break in. Like this, LA is full of guys working in bars and cafes and stuff because they've got this working on the screenplay, and it's really the screenwriter is the kind of most undervalued role probably in Hollywood, because I know people who've written in TV and film, and it just sounds like an absolute nightmare. The actual process is probably really good and fun to do if you've got power, but the actual getting into it is seems a lot harder than getting into publishing. Even in the days of Netflix and Amazon buying so much content, it's something I like. I enjoy watching and stuff, and I enjoy reading the theory about. But in terms of the actual business mechanics of it, I think it'd be incredibly hard to break into, and also it's very much more like a job. I'm not sitting in my lovely little office in the Borders, writing stuff I want to. You'd be on set in LA or New York or London or whatever, and you've got to go and get notes from some star, and you've got to go then turn around your screenplay by 9 o'clock for shooting and all this sort of stuff. And it's like, God, that sounds intense, carnage. Yeah. And, a lot of people get a lot out of that, and it burns out a lot of people. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of being away from home with that sort of thing, because it's not just about writing a screenplay and then doing it. You will have to be on set possibly and stuff like that. Yeah. But I have thought about writing for games. But that's the thing when you start approaching something you love, is that you, with a critical eye, is you start to then see behind the curtain. And like with a lot of, I went through this whole phase of not being able to read fiction because not that I knew a lot, but it was just like, it felt like a busman's holiday where I could see a lot of tricks or whatever, and it was also like I was editing what I was reading, because I'd do so much editing of my own stuff, that I was reading the stuff and I was mentally moving words around in a sentence and paragraphs around and all this sort of stuff. So I just wasn't able to sort of concentrate. I started getting back into that. And one of the things is struggling to watch a lot of film and TV because of, just like, oh, well, why would I care about this character because they've done that or whatever. It's sloppy writing, especially a lot of films nowadays. Their sort of writing is very much secondary to the spectacle as well. So a lot of big budget films, it's just it's like a roller coaster. It's not there for, it's certainly not an emotional roller coaster. It's just a spectacle and CGI robots punching each other and stuff.
But games actually narratively seem to be, getting better and better.
Absolutely, yeah. Like we were talking earlier about the sheer strength of the writing in like The Witcher 3 and in the Uncharted games and Naughty Dog stuff. Like Last of Us, is an incredible game. There is a formula of, there's a bit of running, there's a bit of climbing, there's a bit of talky bits, and then there's a shooty bit. But the story, the world they've created for particularly The Last of Us, where so you can see where they've come up with that, because the Uncharted games, it's like this Indiana Jones, Lara Croft style guy, wisecracking and stuff, who murders hundreds and hundreds of people while he twats about trying to find this ancient thing which inevitably destroys an ancient city and all this sort of stuff. But they obviously thought, right, well, what's good about that is the sort of the runny shooty stuff, but let's make it in a world where that's justified, a post-apocalyptic thing, and then come up with this really sort of strong story that it works on so many levels and it's got all these emotional hooks in it. But a lot of the games nowadays is so like, it's become even like film, that because there's so much money in games that it's a hugely commercial thing, that there's so little risk unless you're doing an indie thing. But like the AAA games like Red Dead Redemption 2 or the Assassin's Creed games or whatever, they're produced by hundreds and hundreds of people, and there are either these sort of open world things, or there's the online shooter stuff like Destiny or Anthem or whatever, that is very sort of not my sort of game, because it's like sort of very sort of teeny sort of thing, and even more in Fortnite and Apex Legends and all that sort of stuff. So but actually sort of a lot of the best games I've played recently are on the old Switch, the indie stuff. So
I think that's right. I think the narrative has shifted to the smaller games, and as you say, the big budget ones have gone more kind of multiplayer or open world, where there's not such a tight narrative.
Absolutely.
One of the games that I really enjoyed was Life is Strange.
Yeah,
which
I've not played that yet, but it's
the game element of it isn't massive. It's almost like a sort of interactive story, but the story is so good that and it does somehow draw you more in than a film, because you do have some control over what's happening.
Oh, the stuff that I've played recently, like on the Switch and PlayStation, like Oxenfree.
That was brilliant.
So What Becomes of Edith Finch? And things like that.
There's nothing much to these games.
Firewatch. Have you played that? So that's like really good storytelling, but has pretty good gameplay elements. Whereas stuff like BioShock or whatever has a lot of sort of incredible world building and storytelling and stuff the gameplay is like go and get this thing and put it there and all that sort of stuff. Whereas those guys are like really developing something new with the storytelling, and before they fell apart, the Telltale stuff. There's some really good, incredible storytelling with the Walking Dead one particularly.
That was excellent.
I mean, it's much better than the TV series.
The Wolf Among Us.
The Wolf Among Us.
That was really
that's
good. Based on was it the
Fables.
Really good. I like that stuff.
No, I think Life is Strange is more along the lines of that kind of episodic. You pick your own adventure a little bit, and you have some choice and stuff. And it's the storytelling, the characters are just top notch.
Yeah. It's definitely one of them I keep forgetting about, and I should play it.
It's good.
Yeah.
Is there any plans to move any of your characters onto the TV or anything like that?
I mean, it's all sort of like I'm interested in having done, but it all comes down to production companies just want to do it, or your agent pitching it to someone that's right. There's been bits of whispers of this, but nothing's been optioned. And I know a lot of writers who've had stuff optioned and nothing ever comes of it, no matter how exciting it is. And it can be a distraction as well. So I know a lot of people who've written screenplays for the books and they never get made. Or 40 drafts later, they're still hammering through the screenplay. So it's a different world, but it's something I'm open to, and I'm trying to develop stuff that has more of that multimedia appeal, I suppose you'd say. So, but it's not something that's like pending, and there's no NDAs signed or anything like that.
And are you going to stay mainly on the police procedural, or are you going to expand?
I really don't want to. I mean, it's given me a lot and stuff, but it's just I still write. I need to still write them because a lot of people want them, and I still actually when I do. There's always something I can really get out of it, but it's just I'm worried that I'm becoming stale with it, because it's like it's the same old stuff, and it's a cop investigating this. So you've got so many constraints, and actually wanting to do more thrillery stuff. So it's like it's just different, There's like just having people in an interview room talking. Or,
it's hard to make that fresh again.
A little chase to break it up and all this sort of stuff, and there's all lots of tricks and techniques I've done, and I put a lot of sort of office politics in books and stuff, because it's what I know and stuff. But it's like I worry about just repeating myself and running through the same stuff again and again. But that's. It's good to have it, but I just need to keep it fresh. So sort of trying to slow down that sort of thing and do sort of different stuff. And it's about keeping yourself interested as well. And obviously you want people to keep, to write something that's like adjacent, so that your fans will follow you and enjoy the books that are slightly different.
You're not going to write a fantasy book or something suddenly.
No, I did write a science fiction book, but it was terrible. It's one of those ones that I keep going back to. How do I get this to work? And it's like, I've got it down to it's a present day thing. So it was set in the future, and it's like, it's actually there's the grass is greener stuff as well. Writing, if you want to write the next Game of Thrones or whatever, it's like, well, it's actually pretty hard to do that. I know a lot of fantasy authors, and it's like, they can make good, decent money, but in terms of that mass market thing, there's only really going to be two fantasy things that work, and that's Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings. And they're not that different, but one is they're just inversions really. One's a lot darker, and and the science fiction stuff is a bit more diverse, because but there's a lot more scope there. But then it's, I don't know, the way the world is just now, it's like it's very hard to predict. It's not in the future. So a lot of this sort of Black Mirror stuff tends to be sort of just around the corner sort of thing. And that's actually quite interesting to think about. But I wrote something about someone who dies now and gets brought back to life 150 years in the future. And I thought it was quite good fun doing the world building and stuff. But then the more I read about the futurology sort of side of things, it was just like,
you can't even predict 10 years time now.
Yeah.
No, that's right, because it can be actually, because something I've written is it's that sort of set in a world like ours, but only a bit in the future. But even that can become very dated if you're using things like cell phones or something that they won't have even in the future, 10 years or something like that.
One of my friends wrote a sort of, it was not quite a post-apocalyptic because it's about the apocalypse, but more it's a dystopian becoming the apocalypse, I suppose is what it was. And I was reading the first chapter, and it's like someone had a tablet, and it's like, this is about 50 years in the future. There's absolutely no way a soldier on a battlefield is going to have a tablet. It's all going to be inside their heads or something. Even like probably 10, 15 years, we won't have phones or laptops. It'll all be brain-computer interface, and the rate of change of technology is just phenomenal now, and for better and worse. So like writing stuff where you're telescoping forward in the future is really difficult. And so the important thing is not about the technology in the future, it's about the characters and about something that you're trying to say about those characters, I think. But I never had an interesting character interesting to say about them, but
So what is next then? What's the next thing that you're working on?
I'm just developing some ideas. There's a couple of sort of projects I'm not allowed to talk about for legal reasons.
We'll pause the recording.
So there'll be more Fenchurch, Cullen and Hunter books, possibly another Dodds book, but a lot of that's not immediate because it's more police procedural stuff. So like I spent, since the start of the year, I've been working on sort of developing ideas and just trying to find something that's got that sort of juicy, high concept-y sort of thing that that I think you'd be interesting to write or have written, and people just go, but it's very illusory. It's you think you've got something and then it just slips through the cracks. So I'm just taking a wee bit of time out just now. Actually, I'm playing computer games and waiting on contracts and so on to get completed in certain things. So it's quite good, but also one of the worst points of being a writer is the waiting for me anyway. And I think a lot of people it's like that because you see a number of people the number of big name authors who switch publisher is pretty small, and you can see why, because you just want that. You know what you get, and you just another contract for this, do that. But same people, or someone's retired, but you know the person in the place and all that. So it's comfort. But I tried to push myself a lot and do something different. So there'll hopefully be some few things I'll be able to announce soonish, but it's all dependent on whether they actually go through and stuff. But it's all exciting stuff, and it's I always want to do sort of different things and learn and have fun doing it. And it's actually sometimes some things it can be good just going through something and going, oh yeah, I'm actually quite good at doing this. So all the time I'm bashing my head against the wall of high concept thriller sort of thing, and actually go, right, I'll just sit down and plot out a police procedure and write it really quickly. So, all right, it's quite good to get to remind yourself what you are good at. A lot of people are, well, certainly me, or you tend to take for granted what you're good at and what your strengths are, and forget and focus on development or weaknesses and stuff. But actually, reminding yourself that you're actually good at certain things is a good thing to do.
Boost.
Yeah.
We try and end every podcast with like quick fire questions, so like a one or other type thing, but you can expand on it if you want. TV or cinema?
TV. I think cinema died in the 90s and it's like a twitching corpse since. But TV's probably going the same way. It's becoming too bloated and too high budget. So video games.
Okay, good answer.
Real book or ebook?
Ebook.
Ebook?
Yeah.
Why is that?
I had loads and loads of paperbacks and stuff, and it just filled up the house, and my girlfriend made me get rid of them. And I just prefer reading a Kindle. It's like I always know where it is, and I just pick it up, and it's like...
And you've got a whole library.
It's a convenience factor.
a whole library of stuff I bought from Kindle Daily Deals or BookBub.
I've got so many books piling up in that library. I've never had time to get around to reading.
Star Wars or Star Trek?
Star Trek any day of the week.
Excellent answer. Marvel or DC?
So I'd say my favourite superhero is probably Batman, but the vast majority it's Marvel. Even though I think they're milking the cinema stuff a bit too much just now. But it's an interesting distinction because the Marvel stuff I think is much more grounded, realistic, real people, relatable characters, whereas the DC stuff, they're these big icons, and they're also, I think, personally feel they're very dated. Even like stuff like The Flash or Green Lantern, when they sort of did them in this little comic Silver Age, they were still very white American stuff and just very generic, and you can see like the struggles they've got with their cinematic universe stuff, that there's so little, they're not fresh. And even the Wonder Woman, people I think liked it because it was a female led superhero. I think the film was actually not very well done, and so, but yeah.
A fancy restaurant or takeaway?
I actually prefer like a nice little cafe, to be honest. So just sort of something, a bit more humble and stuff, or a pub, nice hipster pub, cafe.
Last one: Uncharted or Last of Us?
Oh, Last of Us, yeah. It's just it's like a step up. I mean, Uncharted stuff's funny and zany and stuff, but I played all of them, and none of them are in any way as good as Last of Us. So,
Cool. That was really good. It was really nice chatting to him about video games, and I think trying to break into that market of writing a narrative story for a video game is an interesting one. Yeah,
I mean, like we were saying, it is a field that's definitely growing in terms of storytelling, and a few writers we've spoken to now have thought games is a line where they can go into, which isn't something that probably was the case even 10 years ago.
No, I think that's right. I think the last 5-10 years have really seen an explosion of these games which are really based more about a story than the gameplay. Games like The Walking Dead, Life is Strange, The Last of Us, it's more about the characters. It's like playing a film or like an interactive novel.
I mean, these things are billion-dollar franchises now, so they are almost like the new movies.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it would be an interesting thing to write for as well, because it have to be so much more structured if you're giving people a choice and all that sort of thing.
It's a lot more like those fighting fantasy books.
Yeah, choose your own adventure.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally. Well, it was really great speaking to Ed. Enjoyed that. And next week we've got another good episode for you. We're speaking to Mike Carey, or M.R. Carey, as he's known when he writes his novels. But Mike is a really well-known and respected comic book writer. He's written for basically everything you could think of: X-Men, Fantastic Four, Lucifer, which has also been turned into a TV show, of course, and then a lot of his own work, like The Unwritten, which is a fantastic series. And we talked to Mike about all of that and his novel, The Girl with All the Gifts, and the screenplay of the same name. So please do tune in for that one, because it was a good one. Yeah, really nice chat. Now, as always, of course, you can get in touch. If you'd like to send us a tweet, you can do so at right_gear. If you'd like to send us an email, please send it to podcast@rightgear.co.uk. Yeah, and as usual, thanks to Simon Stokes for all his production assistance. If you are enjoying the podcast, please do remember to give us a rating on Apple Podcasts or whatever podcast app you use, because it really helps us move up the charts. And if we move up the charts, we can go on for longer and we can keep speaking to people, so you can keep listening. Who wouldn't want that, Mark? Exactly. Well, I certainly would. But right now, we'll leave you with one final listen for page 1. The Writer's Notebook is on Kickstarter. Please do go out, tell your friends. It's doing really well, but we need it to continue. Yeah, it's only available until the 2nd of May on Kickstarter, so please go and check it out. And if you like what you see, order yours now. And we'll see you next week. See you next week.